right, good afternoon, Commissioners. Today I'm going to be talking about trends of hunting license sales and the impact of the Saturday opener. So if this first slide here, this is the individual base license sales from 1913 to 2018. So there you can see that we had a peak of 1.38 million licenses sold in 1982. Best as we can tell, that's maybe the most that's ever been sold in any state, anytime. And since then, unfortunately, we've lost about 38% of our annual license buyers. Last year, we sold a total of 855,000 licenses. And if we just go here a little bit more, so if this shows you, and this AJ Garcia made this graph for me. I think he did a really good job here. And this just shows our annual losses or gains. Starting from the 1981 to 82 is that first blue. Oh, they don't need that. No. The first blue that you see there on the top left, we increased 5.25%. The first year of this graph that we're showing here. But then after that, that's when we got to that 1.38 million. But immediately after that, between the 82 and 83 season, we lost nearly 9% of our licensed buyers and then continued to have losses of over 4% for the next 2 years after that. We leveled out a bit in the late 80s into the early 90s, and then continued to lose a bit again. So since 1982, on average, we have lost about 1.4% of our licensed buyers. Overall, the years of loss are average about a 3% loss. So now if we take a look at this year, so this is brand new license data. Then Tammy Klinger and Chris Magnus in licensing worked with me a lot just in the last few weeks to get this. And if we see as of the end of the last calendar year, just a few weeks ago, we had sold 849,575 licenses. And compared to exactly 1 year before, so not the complete license year for last year, but just compared to that exact same day, we had sold 846,224 licenses. So that means that we had a 3,351 license increase from December 31st of 2018 to this year, the same date, which was a 0.4% increase. I think it's also important to note in these last 36 years, we've only had 13 times where our licenses have gone up. So to even go up at all is somewhat unusual. So if we take a look here, that first year that we have there in the darker green on the left, that's the 2016 licenses. So from 2015 to 16, we lost about 2.4% of our licensed buyers. 16 to 17, we lost about 3.25% of our licensed buyers, 3.25%. And then 2017 to 18, we lost about 3.5%. But then you can see this year that orange bar on the far right, that's that 0.4% that we gained from 18 to 19 for this as the end of the calendar year. So if we took that, if we assumed that instead of perhaps an increase this year, if we had continued to decline at a rate of about 3%, which is what those last 3 years were before that, if we had had a 3% loss, our license for this year at the end of 2019 would have been 820,838. But instead, we sold 849,575. So really, from that 3%, if we would have continued to lose at that same average rate, we would have been 28,737 fewer licenses than what we actually had this year. So I think it's important to look at it this way. If we had continued on that same path of losing about 3% a year like we have the last 4 years. So this just shows us also, there's when we bring the Saturday opener into this shows us a lot. So this is 2016, 2017, and 2018 from the first day of license sales through December 31st, each of those years. And this shows a lot of consistency in our license buying patterns. But then, as soon as we add this year, we see a few differences. So the blue line is the 2019, the first half of our license buying year. So we see a little bit higher of a peak at the very beginning of the year. And then we see that the very end of the license year, where that's November 29th, which is the Friday, the day after Thanksgiving, which of course is the day before our Saturday opener. We see a much higher spike there than we do in the previous year. So we see a lot of people buying the biggest spikes there are typically, that's around July 5th, I think, of this year is when we sold a lot of licenses, and that's usually in anticipation of antlerless tags. We see that little blue one around the middle. I don't know if this will reach that far. That is usually the Friday before archery season. So this just tells us a lot about when people buy, but almost always these spikes, especially as the year goes, are on Friday. We see a lot of people buy licenses the day before a season starts. So if we take a little bit closer look and we find out, okay, we saw an increase and we haven't seen an increase in a while. Where is this increase coming from? So if we take a look at our young hunters, this is all young hunters, age 18 to 34. In 2018, we sold 192,000 licenses to that group. This year, we sold about 1,079 more licenses to them, so we're at 193,160. So we had a 0.6%, a 0.56% increase in that group. And if we take that same idea of if we had continued on that same path of losing, we see here we had lost 3% from 15 to 16, 4% from 16 to 17, and another 4%. If we took that, and that's roughly an average of 3.6, but if we even went a little bit lower of a loss and we assumed a 3.5% loss for this year, we would have lost 6,722 licenses instead of that gain of 1,079. So we're really looking there at a difference of about 7,800 licenses than maybe if we had continued to experience that loss like we had the years before. If we talk now just about our resident license buyers, age 18 to 34, if we take a look at that November 29th right there. So the blue is this year, the orangish color is from the 2018, that roughly June 17th to December 31st. November 29th was the second highest day for license sales for this age group. The highest day is July 5th. And 5.6 of all of our licenses sold to our resident hunters 18 to 34 was sold on November 29th, which is, of course, the day before our Saturday opener. And if we take the entire week before, and we compare it to the week before in 2018. So in 2018, that entire week was the Monday to Sunday before the Monday opener of our rifle deer season. And this year, it was a Saturday to a Friday before that Saturday opener. For this year, we sold 1,346 more licenses in that week leading up to the opening of general firearms deer season, which is a 7% increase. Okay, and next we look at, so a lot of the discussion that was had last year talks about, obviously, the schools, they're like K to 12 schools. Most of them do have off that Monday after Thanksgiving, and the kids are able to go, but the colleges do not. So if kids have to go back to school after Thanksgiving, they typically would have classes in colleges that Monday morning immediately after. So will this have this positive impact for these students that would be 18 to 21 who would be in college that time of the year? So for every single one of the groups, for 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20 and 21-year-olds, from 2018 to 2019, we sold more licenses for all four of those age groups. So for the total combined of those four ages, we sold 43,844 in the fall of 2018 compared to 44,911 sold this year. So right there in that group of our college age hunters, that's a 2.4% increase for 18 to 21-year-olds. As you can see there, that was an even bigger loss annually that we had experienced. So it was a 4% loss from 15 to 16, and then we lost 5% each of the 2 years after that. So that's, if we had assumed that we had continued on that same path of losing between 4 and 5% of our 18 to 21-year-olds each year, we would have lost 1,973 licenses for those 4 years of age there. Instead, we sold 44,911. So we have that difference of a positive 3,000 licenses just for hunters 18 to 21. Okay, and if we take a look here at our resident hunters age 18 to 21, this is the same idea, just taking a look at when they buy their licenses. So again, that November 29th was also the second highest day, compared July 5th being the biggest. 2,542 licenses sold to resident hunters 18 to 21 years old. And this is 6% of all the licenses were sold just that day before that Saturday opener. If we take a look then, that same idea, what we looked at for the 18 to 34-year-olds, for 18 to 21-year-olds, in the 7 days before the rifle deer opener, we sold about 4,500 in 2018 and about 5,300 this year. It's 827 more individual licenses sold just in that 1 week, which is an 18% increase for that age group. Okay, next, talking about where some of the difference from this year to last year was. So we saw that we have 3,300 more individual licenses sold this year. 616 of those came from a variety of resident license types, but non-residents made up the rest of them. So we saw that 2,700 of our additional licenses came from non-residents, which is about 82% of all of the increase came from them. And we had just a 5.6% increase in non-resident licenses sold in 1 year. So if we take a look here, we obviously see similar trends, but not exactly the same. We do not see that same beginning of the year activity from our non-resident licensed buyers, but then we see that November 29th just really going very high for this particular group. And I think it's important to note, if someone is buying the day before, they are probably almost certainly not actually buying online, that they're buying at some sort of licensed vendor, and with very, very few exceptions, they are in Pennsylvania. So that means they are probably in Pennsylvania. We have a hypothesis, and we can possibly test this with some survey research to see if perhaps this is extended family members or even children of people who just were able to stay for an extended Thanksgiving holiday and able to go hunting because it was a Saturday opener and they didn't have to return. We don't know that for sure. It seems possible, though, because they are buying it so late, that they were already in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and for the Thanksgiving holiday. So if we just take a look then at when they buy, you saw obviously that really big spike. That was the single biggest date of purchase, which was pretty obvious from the graph. We sold a total of 51,662 non-resident licenses as of December 31st. That's 6,112 non-resident licenses sold just on the one day, the day before the Saturday opener, which was nearly 12% of all of our non-resident licenses sold for the year. So you can see also, I think that graph shows something that's a little different than some of the other graphs we saw, was that this has gone and exceeded, the previous 3 years of our non-resident license sales. So just some quick summary here of the key findings. Since 1982, our license sales have had an average loss of 1.4%, and they've only increased 13 times since 1982, including this year. And this was the first time that we've had an increase since the 2012 to 2013 season. We increased 0.4%. Our young hunters increased, so we had a 0.6% increase for our hunters 18 to 34, and a 2.4% increase for our hunters aged 18 to 21. Our non-residents contributed a lot in the increase in license sales, and we also saw that a very large percentage of our licenses were sold to young hunters and non-resident hunters in the day before and the few days leading up to this Saturday opener, which would lead us to believe there's a relationship between the Saturday opener and the increase in those groups. That's everything I have. No questions?
Are there any questions, comments? Commissioner Hoover.
Coren,
Yes.
in all of your studies and the work that you've done, how does our license sales this year compare to the national average?
Well, we are typically second highest. So Texas is the only state that usually sells any more licenses than we do. It's funny, my boss, Steve Smith, right before we had done this, we did ask some of the neighboring states. We didn't get responses from all of them, but they had experienced, 3 that replied to us did have losses this year, ranging from 2% to 8%. So, I mean, I think we were number 1 prior to Texas having, and they have a lot more people than we do now. And so I think for many years we had sold the most licenses in the country.
Thank you.
Sure.
Are there any other questions, any other comments? Coren, thank you.
No, my pleasure.
Appreciate that.
Sure.
I think we're moving on to Derek now.